Gotcha. All right, we are recording. Yeah, no, it's definitely a lineage I think it's proud of, and it's something when you're talking to your customers, made in America products, particularly with amplification. There's a certain robustness and things like that as our amplifiers. I think carries that through. And one of the things that we've noticed we've been happy with the last few years is when you go to a CDO or an ISE or these regional events, we get approached by a lot of manufacturers to utilize audio control products in their demo theaters and showrooms and things like that. Companies like Origin Acoustics and Stealth Acoustics and Triad and James and guys like that. So it's kind of a good reflection, I think, of what our perception in the market is, as a performance company. Customers like to see that, dealers like to see that. So we're not just a company that just turns on and plays speakers. We're really focused, and especially on power levels. And when I say we're speaker agnostic, that means, we work with speaker companies, to maximize their performance, whether it's through our distributed audio or through what we're doing with theater. So I think that's kind of the common theme. And certainly we're seeing a lot more of our partners start working with Cricks and companies like that on the theater side. So I think you'll see some nice compatibility in regards to that. So this is the product that kind of got it started, I guess, 40 years ago. The 520, which is basically a 5-band EQ with a couple of pieces of wood on. This is what Dirac looked like in the 70s, I guess. So it was probably a little better than that. But now we, if you were an audio control dealer or you're connected with us, basically the DIY phases where clients would come in and buy speakers. They take them home, and maybe the speakers didn't sound exactly the way they thought they sounded in the showroom. And they'd go back there, and the salesperson, the retailer, would end up recommending various things. And equalization, like the 520 here, was certainly a key part of that. And that basically allowed boost and cut at various frequencies and allowed the speakers kind of match with the acoustic, fingerprint of the room from that standpoint. And I think we sold that in the US for about $350, and it was kind of that product that bootstrapped the company in 1977, actually. So quite a ways back. Fast forward a few years, and as dealers started to do projects, and clients would say, "Hey, if you can come out to my house, I'll buy more stuff from you," basically. And that's where the advent of architectural speakers, larger design home theaters. So it went from being a DIY to obviously having an integration partner to make that happen. And so we subsequently took products like the 520 and started building equalization into things like our Architect and Director amplifiers. And those products, obviously, rack space was key. When I first started with the company and everybody talked about rack space, we were certainly going, "What's a rack? What do you need that for?" And nowadays, obviously, that's just an integral part of anyone's project. So you'll see, those kind of things from our products as they scale from one side to the other. So as a company these days, we touch a lot of categories. Obviously, we're going to focus on theater a little bit this morning, but whole house audio. We have networking, matrix amplifiers. We have standalone amplifiers in our Architect Director series. We have zone amplifiers with our Bijous and Rialtos and those also carry over in some cases if you're doing Atmos channels or things of that nature. And then, of course, home theater, which is our X series. And then come this spring, we're going to be launching a line of 70-volt amplifiers also for kind of the resi-commercial outdoor space. So kind of allow you to engage with that side of things. And that kind of matches what we do with measurement and correction. And some of you guys might know us a little bit from car audio too. We have a whole mobile audio division out there, which a lot of it is focused around OEM integration products these days, but also still having kind of that high performance caliber from there. So home theater, I mean, this is an exciting time to partner up with us in home theater. We've been working and developing processors for about 15 years now, as well as amplification to go around that. And this year was pretty exciting as we launched our, literally almost a year ago, our X series platform. And now we took the mainstay audio performance that I think everybody was very excited about with AudioControl in terms of audio performance and the Class H amplification that we used inside of our receivers and standalone, and the audio section that we used inside of the pre-pros. And we gave it 16 channels. So you have the ability to address not only your traditional 7.1 and 5.1, but now get into the 9.1.6 type of applications. And then we added a level of flexibility here also where we have a web interface. So I can actually log on, and 4 of those speakers, and those of you guys who have played with the menus and the GUIs on the processors probably seen that you have the ability to kind of personalize any 4 of those speakers. So they could be for additional height speakers. They could be adjusted to be a voice of God for an Auro 3D. They could be set for widths or things like that. So there's a mappable capability that's done via this web GUI. And the web GUI you can obviously get to without having to be in front of the unit, which is very nice. Whereas in the past, you'd need a remote control and on-screen display and things like that. And then, we do full support of the 3D immersive audio formats of Dolby Atmos, IMAX Enhanced, DTSX. So I think we covered all the bases nicely. Later on in the year, we'll probably get into DTSX Pro. And the current platform supports HDMI 2.0 and 2.2. And also an upgrade down the road will be an 8K 2.1 version, as that content becomes available. But it's I know people buy 8K TVs, and right now they have an expensive 4K TV basically. So being I think in that option. Then obviously the secret sauce of audio control is calibration and room correction and bringing things together. And that will carry us a little bit into our conversation today about the Dirac live room correction. And Dirac, we looked at a lot of different calibration systems over time, some of which were basic ones. And there's a lot of auto systems that would kind of focus on getting rid of peaks and dips and bringing it all together, which is okay, but it didn't really give all what you needed with calibration. And Dirac was one of those first systems that actually looked at level and time. So it'll help get at the speakers so they all arrive at the listening area at the same time. So that was in a timeout, and then go through and set the level. So that was something that was kind of unique from that standpoint. The microphone, obviously being able to plug into your laptop is certainly a benefit as opposed to having to run it back to the rack. So I think we've had a lot of benefits from that side of things. And then you can take your measurements, and Steve Haas, our technical services manager, who has joined us this morning, is going to walk us through some of the steps here in a little bit. But we have the ability to create your own target curves, and then you take your measurement curves of what you captured, and then that data goes up to the Dirac servers in Sweden, probably Asia, but Sweden always sounds better. And then they calculate the proper inverse algorithm, and that gets downloaded in the processor, and away you go. Now, obviously, it's a little more complex than that, but from a standpoint of what's involved in getting a result, I was on a seminar yesterday, and actually Peter Lingdorf spoke about his days of calibration and stuff, and he's obviously a legendary audio guy, and his early calibration systems, he said, he goes, it was pretty quick. Sometimes it only took 3 days to calibrate, We're like 3 days, like, okay. As an integration company, I think that's a little bit long. So the Dirac process, once you get comfortable with it, I think you'll find is fairly smooth. It takes a little bit of time, obviously, to kind of be set up ahead of time. So I appreciate you guys kind of jumping on here ahead of time in front of a project so that you have the ability to do that. I'm going to stop sharing here, and this is where it's going to get fun. So Steve, are you around there, sir?
Yes, I'm right here.
All right, so we have Steve on, great. And then let's see, you guys want to do a share of the team viewer?
Yeah, I've just sent Quentin to go and share his screen.
Excellent.
And then you just got to request control, and then you Steve will request control.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a Maestro X7 processor in our cinema at the moment, and Quentin's already hooked up the microphone and put it in position, and that's hooked up to his PC, and he's running the Dirac software on the utility on the PC.
And for those of you that have not done this before, if you go to our website, you can download the Dirac there's a link to the Dirac site, so you can download the calibration software from there to put it on your computer and go from there.
Chris, does that only, does that work only for audio control? Or can you use it on other systems too?
Well, the generic Dirac software, I think, works with others, but once it connects to our device, it will recognize it as audio control.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, basically, once it launches, it scans the network, and if it sees an audio control receiver, it'll just pop up and you select it. All
Steve,
right, so
All right. I'll turn
we-
it over to you, Steve, and you do the play-by-play, and I'll be color commentary as needed. How's that?
Sure.
Okay.
So, okay, just a couple questions up front. So, have you run Dirac before, anybody? Sounds like
Chris,
a no.
can we do this as an open forum so guys can unmute their mics and ask questions as we go along, or do you want to
Yeah, I think
questions to the end?
Yeah, I think if you guys want to unmute your mics and ask questions, that's fine. And if you do have any background noise, small children or trucks driving by, if you could, be
Just
courteous and mute yourself again, that would be great. So let's see, and I'll monitor the chats here on the side.
All right, so okay, cool. So we're at the microphone page. So you guys have already downloaded the mic calibration file. That's great. You get that directly from our website. This is pretty darn important. If you fail to load this calibration file, which basically ensures the microphone has a flat frequency response to capture the sweeps properly, I've seen it where if you don't have this loaded, one of two things happens. Either the calibration just doesn't sound very good, or it really can't read the sweeps because the curve isn't flat, and it just Dirac thinks something's wrong, and it'll give you some error message, and it just gives you a headache. So this is a small but very important step at the beginning. So yeah, so you got that going. So then from there, I would argue to go to proceed to volume calibration, and I would argue this is the most important step of the whole calibration. Let's see here. Is it going? Come on. There you go. So the first thing I always like to say is this step, when you're setting levels here, you're just setting levels for the calibration itself. You're not setting levels for the end channel configuration of your processor. A lot of installers think, when you're adjusting levels, that they're setting these in stone for the end result, and you're not doing that. This is just to ensure the microphone can pick up the tone sweeps properly for Dirac to do its calibration properly. And there's essentially three stages here, right? You got the master output, which is essentially the big volume knob on the front panel of the unit itself. It'll control the overall output of all the processor. You got the mic gain, which is a mic pre, right? The sensitivity for the mic. And I always tell the installers, just keep it at 100%. There's almost really no reason to go above or below it. You definitely want to keep it at 100, and that's a nice nominal setting. In rare corner cases, you may have to adjust it, but for the most part, 100% is fine. And then you have the individual gains, right, for each channel. And so those are helpful when, say, for whatever reason, which is not uncommon, those second height channels or their surround backs are lower or higher for whatever reason than everything else. And then you can do the fine tuning to make sure they're all within range of each other, right? And yeah, I'm sorry, Darren, you said it earlier. I think you said this was, X7. Yeah, X7. And so the other thing to note as soon as you're dealing with the pre-pro, you might have different amplification, right? Which might have you need to adjust the levels more, because depending on the amp, there might be more power or less power. There might be a little more massaging to it. But overall, yeah. So let's hear. So are we live here where we can start playing test tones and doing that type of thing, or I wasn't quite certain.
No, totally live. It's hooked up to speakers and subwoofers, and it's live.
Wonderful. And so beautiful. So, and the mic is in the basically the sweet spot position, and the mic pointing upwards, right?
Yeah, if you look at the camera, you can actually see the back of the room and the couch. And if you look at the middle of the couch,
that's,
the two
you know what?
cushions,
There you go.
actually, you can actually see where
Yeah,
the
I see it. Perfect. I didn't catch on that. Yeah, I see it right there. Perfect. Wonderful. So, all right. So what I like to do, just the first round of this, is just get a snapshot of every channel, just to get an idea of how they sit in relationship to everything else. Because a lot of times the first instinct is to, as soon as you play the test tone for the front left channel, start adjusting it to make sure it's in the range you want, but without knowing what all the other channels are doing yet. So it's always good to do just a full run through once to get a general idea. Excuse me. So I'm just going to play the first tone and we're going to see what happens here. All right. Yeah, so. Yeah, so basically, you see how well you guys can see it, but basically that blue area, that's kind of like where you want it to be. And what I kind of recommend installers do when they're first doing it, try to get everything to around -13, -12, like near the upper bands of that range. That's going to ensure a nice strong signal, keep the noise floor low, so there's no background noise that might get in the way of Dirac being able to read the tone sweep, right? So then you just go through all of them.
Darren, since there's no microphone in the theater that's playing into the Zoom system, we can't. Otherwise, we would probably be hearing pink noise playing through here.
We're hearing it here.
Exactly.
You're hearing it on your end. Okay. Good.
So I'm going to do this because all your pictures in the Zoom meeting is kind of making it hard for me to see everything. Bear with me here. Come on, I know you could do it. Oh, maybe not. Hold on a sec here. Oh, that's what I'm doing. Never mind. Got it. I swear to God, I know how to Zoom. All right. All right. So yeah, this looks like a 7.1, right?
Yes, 7.1 system.
Okay, perfect. So as you can see, for whatever reason, the center is a little hotter, and front right, front left that's all looking pretty good. It's looking like the sub. There you go. Good. So that's nice and hot too. So, so everything's not looking that bad, really. I'm going to check the center one more time. Yeah, for some reason that's a little hot. So then you can just do this and sort of bring it down a bit and then retest. Yeah, it's looking a little bit better. So, I tell the installers, you don't have to get everything exactly right. We're just getting, ballpark range. This is just, again, to make sure there's a healthy signal to the microphone for the test. And I would even maybe bring this down slightly but that's looking good. So any questions on that? Pretty straightforward.
Here, I will.
All right. So,
you guys, I'm monitoring.
After you get the levels right. Yep, I'm seeing that here.
Yep, Steve.
So now this is where.
Up, so all good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I had to minimize all your pictures because it's kind of in the way of the screen for a sec. But so yeah, so this is where you're going to tell Dirac the listening area that you're doing, which is most commonly a dedicated theater or a relatively decent sized living room, right? So what this is doing, essentially, you're telling the listening area, right? So if you have the customer who has spent all this money on a huge theater and just wants to sit by himself, you can use this one, but most commonly we're doing the wide imaging because like I said, dedicated theater or decent living room with a big couch, that kind of thing. So this is determining how many listening positions Dirac will tell you to capture. So we're going to do that. We're going to go proceed to measure. And so as you can see, you know, with this one, it's got 17 positions, I believe. Dirac tells you have to do a minimum of 5 to get a halfway decent amount of information to do the room correction properly. You know, if you do less than 5, it'll throw a warning saying, hey, you really should do at least 5, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, I'm of the mind, if you're going to do Dirac, you want to do as many as you can, all 17 ideally. But in the real world, we all know sometimes at the end of the day, they just need to get something going, do a minimum of 5, and keep going. But so for this particular demonstration, for the sake of brevity, essentially, we could do 1 or 5 or whatever you want to do, or if you want to do all 17. But so the mic's where it needs to be. So we essentially make sure we're not in the way of the mic, step back, and then we hit measure selected position.
So on our side, yeah, we can hear a sweep. It's just running through the whole frequency band. We can hear it in the room.
Yep. So yeah, so there you have it. It basically gives you all the bands. You can actually sit there and look at each one and color code and whatnot. So and at this point, it's rinse and repeat. You basically get the first one, you move the mic to the next position, and Dirac will tell you which one, but you could easily tell, no, I'm going over here. I'm going to do this one first and then go around. So how many guys you want to do, or do you just want to do this one position and just see the whole process through? Let me know.
We can do 2 measurements. I'm getting Quentin to move to another position for us now.
Okay.
Just don't look at our tripod. We had to make a plan. We haven't got a proper tripod, but
no worries.
Okay. Steve, would you recommend that
you'd
they
be surprised how many?
Would you recommend they have the system up and running and playing for a few days before they run the Dirac, or to break it in per se, or run it from the get-go?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I guess it all depends, right? Typically, you know, the installers I talk to, they're running it. They just, you know, they finished everything up. This is the last step. They just need to get it room calibrated and moved on to the next job, right? So they typically don't have time to listen to it. But yeah, if you know, if you're in a situation, a demo room, in your situation, yeah, listen to a few days without the curve, and maybe from there you can get an idea of what you think needs to be improved or not. And then you can run the Dirac. Then you'll be very quickly be able to A/B, so to speak, whether engaged or not, and see what it's doing essentially. But yeah, it, you know, both. It all comes down to the situation. Both arguments are valid, to do it right away or wait and see, kind of a thing.
And you want your furniture and any
cool. So it looks like
position. So
yeah, definitely. You know, if it's in a situation where the room's not done yet, you want to run Dirac, I wouldn't recommend it, because you're just gonna have to do it again, unless it's going to be a long time before it's done. Or say if not all the speakers are set up. I've talked to installers like, well, these speakers aren't set up yet, the surround backs, etc. Well, then you could do it, but then you just have to do it again whenever you get those speakers up. So, you know, it's all about the situation at that time. But it looks like the mic is moved. We're in the top right position, so gonna go ahead with it. All right, and then on to the next one. So Quentin, gonna be moving the mic, or are we moving on?
He's just gone down there now. He's on his way.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And for $2,000, Steve is available to do this service for you every day. So log on and tell you where to put the microphone.
Plus expenses.
Plus expenses, of course.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the nice things about Dirac, I mean, while there is a little bit of a learning curve here at the beginning to get up and running, once you get done, the system is pretty comprehensive. This is the Dirac 3.0 software they're using these days, so the interface in the GUI is a little bit more intuitive from that standpoint. And if you get to a point where you run into a hiccup or something like that, if you make an appointment with Steve or the team at our office, we can kind of team viewer into your project and just kind of help identify anything, like, oh, I said it. I mean, I think inevitably, Steve, what's probably the most common question regarding levels, I guess, for setting? Or
yeah, the two biggest things that could be a roadblock is either just setting levels up front, like say the subwoofers are just insanely loud because you get a theater that's got 4 subs, so it's a matter of massaging that so it's not overpowering the microphone, or those pesky high channels in the back just can't get loud enough type of thing. That or just initial connection with the network. Sometimes you're troubleshooting network issues that something on the network is not allowing the Dirac software to see the processor on the network. And most commonly, that's due to the fact that there's some sort of IP control system on the network that's trying to talk to the processor while the Dirac's trying to talk to the processor at the same time. So just a matter of taking that control system off the network during the calibration. Those are the two big ones.
Steve, that looked like Jonathan wants to ask a question.
Thanks. Just as far as reference levels go, what speaker would you start with to provide a reference for gain setting with the system? Because if you start with the subwoofer, it could easily overpower the tweeter. So where would you start first?
Right. As far as when we're initially setting levels with in the step before.
Yeah, for level setting. So in order to prevent you from having any of your amplifiers or clipping, where would you start with your gain setting?
So, right. Yeah. So we might want to go back just so I can show you what I was doing. But yeah, essentially, you keep the mic pre 100%. You don't touch the individual gain controls yet for each channel, and just adjust the main output. And essentially, with that main output, you're just getting it into the ballpark. So what I do is, I just start with front left and just go through each channel and see what's louder or softer. I mean, the biggest one with that is, to your point, the subwoofer sometimes might be too loud. And depending on the room, you might actually have to go to the sub amp, the individual amp, and maybe bring the gain down or bring the gain up, because they might be a little bit too loud or soft to get it into the range with everything else. But I wouldn't, there isn't a specific speaker that I would start with. It's not about making sure you're not setting levels to any one speaker. You're just trying to get them all in a ballpark range. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm answering your question though. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was not necessarily about individual speakers, so as to which driver you would start with, because you've got maybe 4-way, you might have 3-way only, so you've got tweeter, mid bass, and subwoofer maybe. So if you start with setting, do you deal with clipping in this setup, or are you just going for a level based on not more than 100%?
In regards to the channel level for the calibration?
Yes, because not the reference level that you use, but to set levels based on, I mean, if you have, do you identify by means of the system whether you need more, if you're trying to say, for example, go for a certain reference level on a subwoofer and your target curve, your tweeters cannot keep up with your target curve based on the subwoofer level that you're after, do you identify that through this system, or is that just based on subjective listening?
Right. So I think I understand what you're asking. So essentially, the majority of that, what you referred to, is actually Dirac takes care of that. With this, when you're setting the levels here, you're just getting what's the word? You're just referencing the SPL levels per each channel for that particular room.
Okay. So that means that if you had planned that your subwoofer must be 9 dB higher than 1K, and then you discover that, or that the system discovers that 1K can't sustain that, then it will bring down the subwoofer level to the point at which your target curve is met.
Exactly, and that's something we could assess after we do the sweeps, because when it gets to actually making the curve for the room, you have a lot of switches and levers to be able to adjust that to your liking. But yes, essentially the idea with this calibration is that it captures all the sweeps, and then Dirac will then calibrate each channel to make sure, to what you're saying, make sure the sub isn't overpowering, et cetera, et cetera.
Perfect. Thanks for that for so far.
Okay, cool. And then let's see if I go back to there. So, yep. I didn't catch it. Did Quinton move the mic? Because I think we're going down here now to lower, or so I think we're still at the mic position we just did. We have the two top fronts and then the center.
Already done the third. You've done the third sweep. Do you want to move it down to the next level?
We can do a fourth.
We'll do a fourth. You'll go in there now and move it. Fourth and a fifth, and then at least you've got 5 points.
Okay.
He's moving it down now to the front bottom right.
Perfect. All right, here we go. Yeah, I thought this happened. I think when going back to volume calibration, it decided to adjust something. Give me a sec here. Yeah, it's just a quirk of Dirac. So if you're in the middle of doing this and you're like, oh, I need to go back and adjust something, what it did there was just bring the overall volume down for some reason. We just had to boost it back up, even though we didn't touch anything. So this should work now.
May I ask more questions?
Most definitely.
The positions that the microphone are placed in to measure for the calibration are potentially places that your head will never be. So is that to get a more of an insight into the room as opposed to targeting what the listener will hear?
Exactly. You're basically defining the listening area. And, I'm not going to speak for the engineering behind Dirac, but essentially, from what I understand, the mic positions are basically getting the acoustics of the room. And that's why they're above and below listening ears, to get kind of a sense of all the reflections. But yeah, you're defining the listening area, or how big or how small. That's the amount of positions. And these positions are, I always tell installers that they're guidelines. They're not set in stone, because every room is going to be different, right? So, for example, let's say if this was actually a dedicated theater with like 3 rows of seats, the listening positions in front of and behind the listener would be the back row and the front row, and you would probably put the mic in the middle position, right? So, does that make sense?
Yes. So can you choose to create an average or discard some measurements that might be skewing your overall results?
That's a good question. No, essentially, like I said, once we get to that next point where you're actually adjusting the curve, it'll probably make a little more sense. But whatever, Dirac doesn't give you the ability. It was like this one sweep is an outlier, throw it away. Essentially, I think the idea is, oh, that didn't read right. Let's go back and do it again until it reads right.
So it does influence equally. Each curve has as much bearing as the next measurement.
Yeah, the more passes, the more information Dirac has to make the better curve. That's why they say you got to do at least 5. For example, if you do 1, you're not getting much, because it's just one position. It doesn't have a lot of information, so it might sound better, but it's definitely not really achieving the potential of what it could do with just 1 pass.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so you guys might have noticed it didn't want to do that one. It got angry and said, no, there's a low signal to noise level. I think there's something going on with the sub channel. So we just have to go back and test a couple things here. Does that sub have a signal sense on it, the amp? All right. All right, let's try this again. Oh, there it is. There you go. Perfect. Yep, just got to move it one more time, then we'll have the minimum of 5. All right, here we go. All right. So, are we just doing the 5? Is that the plan?
Yeah, 5's good. I think we're good to go to the next step.
Okay, great. So now, essentially, by us clicking this proceed to calibration, that's when Dirac starts to crunch the numbers, so to speak, and create the curve. So you see this. So let's see here. Give me a sec. Do that. So basically, so that I don't know, kind of lime green straight line, that is the target curve. That's the default target curve of Dirac, right? That's just gonna. This is what it's gonna adjust for. And on the right, you got all the different groups. That's front, left, and right. That's the center channel. Is the sub, obviously. That's so just a good way to illustrate. So with the sub, you see these guys right here, these lines. These are what they call the curtains. That that's where you determine or tell Dirac which frequency range to adjust. Just from looks like 23.5 to 163 hertz is going to be adjusting. Of course, you can move these curves, curtains, up and down, and it'll adjust for it. But obviously, typically you don't want to do that on this guy. But versus get the center. And it's going from 90 to 13K. And then you can always change that. I've talked to installers that they believe that just Dirac should just be adjusting the low frequencies, and they bring that curtain down to like 1K or something. But what I always tell, especially if you're new to it, just start with the default curve and see what it sounds like. Because the majority of everybody I talk to, the default curve sounds great. The customer loves it. They're done. They walk out the door. They don't have to worry about it anymore. It's the installers or the customers that listen to it. You know what? I don't like this. It doesn't sound right. There's X, Y, and Z. That's where you can come in here and actually adjust the curve. So, for example, these these little dots here along the line, you could sit there and go, okay, I want the thing to be higher, right? It should be higher up. And when you do that, you'll see in a sec, Dirac sort of redoes stuff, and then we'll start bringing that curve up. So you can see here, basically, I got the lag on this thing, so bear with me here. So that's what it measured. That's the frequency response it measured, right? And then that's what it's correcting. That's what's going to correct to. If you put the two together, boom, right? So obviously, we don't want to do that, so we just bring it back down. We can also save these curves and apply them to different channels if you want. What I'm going to do, since I'm just going to tell it to set the default curve back, since I sort of adjusted it. And you can tell which the groups, you see the groups on the right, group 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the applicable ones here. You just select group 1, and it'll get it back to flat there to what it was. But yeah, so this is where you could sit and really adjust the curve if need be. And the cool thing about this new platform, you got 3 curves you could store on the processor. The last generation, you only do 1 curve. So if you didn't like that, you got to do the whole thing again and put the curve back on. Where this guy, you can do 3 different curves. Then you can actually just toggle through the 3. One with base optimization, one without, one with your adjusted EQ settings versus the default, and be able to really tune it in that way. So I'm sure at this point somebody has some questions about this.
So just a question on those presets, Steve. From an automation perspective, if you've got that audio control processor connected to an automation system in a cinema room, if you've selected your first measurement as a couch with a wide angle measurement, can you say, obviously when you save that preset, can you then do a next measurement where you do like a single couch measurement, a more intimate measurement? And then if the client goes and wants to select where he's got a lot of people coming in the room, and then you can have that as a preset on your automation system to choose between different presets. So if he's got more people or him alone in the room, can that be done?
Or for different listening positions.
Yeah, so I think I understood that question. You got to forgive me. The mic wasn't picking you up as well as it could have, so it was kind of muffled. But yeah, you're talking about presets and basically adjusting the curve for different listening environments, whether there's 1 or 2 people in a room versus many.
Correct. Yes. What I'm thinking from an automation perspective, if a client has got a preference of either or him being alone in the room or having multiple people in the room. So that obviously when Dirac does the calibration, you go wide calibration, then it kind of covers as many seats as possible, and it would be the best to have many people in the room. But so if he goes in there alone and he goes, you know what, I want it focused and all the calibration focused on that one position from a preset button on a remote control or a touch panel or a keypad or whatever the case would be from an automation perspective, that preset should be available from an automation system. So to select I'm alone or I've got multiple people in the room.
Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, there's definitely the discrete commands with for the processor to send, okay, go to room EQ1, room EQ2, or room EQ3. And then it's just a matter of, doing the Dirac project. One project and saved curve would have the focused listening area versus the wide image. Yes, for sure.
It's Jonathan. I'd like to check, are those 3 curves that you're available, are they available on the composite setting or are they available per channel?
No, they're global, so it's not per channel. Basically, and this actually I had a question the other day about this because one customer was asking, okay, fine, they're watching a movie, they're full Atmos, the full 17 speakers, whatever, but then they also want to just listen to stereo music. Do I need to do a different curve for that? And the answer is no, because the cool thing, when you run the Dirac curve, it's applicable, it's separate from what you're telling the processor to decode, because the time alignment's not going to change because it's still 2 speakers in a room. The EQ is still the same because it's the same room. It's just playing 2 speakers versus multiple. So you wouldn't have to do separate curves for that, unless, of course, that being said, you could do whatever you want. You could conceivably do a completely different curve just for focus listening for stereo. The trick with that is, this is something I forgot to mention earlier. Part of how the Dirac works is, it's when you first launch it, it's just reading the speaker configuration from the processor. So if you set it for 7.1, it's going to say, okay, you have 7.1 speakers. A common thing that gets overlooked when you first install it for the first time. Let's say the installer just forgot to do the full speaker config within the processor, so it's just at default. So it's reading 7.1.2, but you have a 9.1.6 system. Dirac doesn't know that. It just thinks, oh, it's 7.14. I'll test for that. It'll start playing test tones to channels that aren't there, but Dirac doesn't know that, right? So to that point, let's say you run a curve for 7.1.4, and then you apply it and it's fine. Let's say you bypassed Dirac curve and then went into the speaker config and told it, okay, I now have 2 height channels, or I got rid of the height channels, it won't allow you to put the curve back on, because it's like, no, this curve is for 7.1.4, not 7.1. So if you really want to, you could go in there and manually change it back to stereo and then apply the stereo curve to it and vice versa. But that's a lot of work when I'd imagine you probably don't need to do it.
Thanks.
Again, not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, great. Any other questions about the calibration of the curve itself?
Yeah. Yes. Just say
Sorry, okay.
Sorry,
I have
Stephen.
a question.
Okay, no, go.
Is there a point that it warns you when, if you do like you showed on those adjustments, where it'll tell you this is unattainable or this is too far? I mean, if you try to boost too much, does it give you some indication, or does it just let you do it and attempt to try and match what you're asking it to do?
Right. Yeah. Like if you're boosting way too much high end, is there a message going, yeah, man, I can't do that, or I don't recommend that? That's another great question. I don't believe so. I've never run into that. I've been supporting this product for about 5 years. I haven't run into that yet. I think my guess right now is if that were to happen, you would hear it. You would hear a speaker trying to hit that curve when it can't. So,
Yes.
but yeah, I don't believe there's any kind of warning.
Okay, but at least you'd see it, because it's now going to attempt to, like you did earlier, you try to boost that one just as an example. It's going to attempt to try and create that for you. And then you'll hear it's causing a problem. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Or vice versa, you make it sound better, right? Exactly.
Right, Stephen, just a question on that bass control, the off, up mix and full bass optimization. I had some questions regarding with some dealers on how that works and what's the difference.
Yeah, so, and this is where, when it comes to this bass control, I'm probably not as well versed as I should be, because this is a relatively new thing. And when I've read the white paper on Dirac's website, you know, my eyes crossed a little bit, because it's pretty involved when it comes to the bass control. But for a real top level, so the difference between up mix only versus bass optimization, essentially up mix, for example, you know, our bass model XR4, it's only 7.1.4. It doesn't have the extended channels. And then that Dirac, when it connects to an XR4, up mix is the only thing that's available. You can't do the full bass optimization, because the full bass optimization really is for multiple bass channels. So, because you'll get these theaters where you basically have 4 to 6 subs, and they're all dedicated, individual controlled, and you want to have that bass optimization so the interplay between the 4 or 5 or 6 subs are in check, essentially. Whereas the up mix only, it's just essentially, it's going to just control that one main bass channel, and that's it. Again, as far as exactly how it works, you know, what it's actually doing to, you know, basically manage it, you know, maybe Chris can jump in on that, but I don't have the full tech details on that. Suffice to say, the idea behind it is, you know, I believe it controls, you know, in a room where, you know, everybody's experienced this, like in certain parts of the room, you get a lot more bass versus others. And it's all about measuring, you know, the standing waves. And if you're sitting in a bass trap versus you're sitting in the couch and there's just way too much bass, that kind of thing. That's what it's attempting to control.
And especially as you have multiple, you know, I mean, the optimum situations, you have multiple subwoofers. So you want to be able to splice those multiple subs into individual drivers from that side of things. And there's certainly some secret sauce, you know, everybody, I think Steve and I joke about it. You'd love to have like a little Y button on the Dirac software sometimes, because it does bring up a lot of questions. You go, hey, what is that? And why does it do that? And, you know, certainly part of Dirac's measurement algorithm, how that all works. So there is a, if you guys go on YouTube under audio control, there was a presentation that we did at the CEDIA show at the end of last year. And actually I had Jacob from Dirac do the presentation. And so he walked through what a little bit of, he delved into the secret sauce of Dirac. So he kind of talks about what it does. And as Steve said, the base, well, subsequently it was base management. Now I believe it's called base control, but that module was just introduced in the latter part of last year to kind of blend speakers together. But as he said, the 16, with the 16 channel model, certainly where you can take advantage of that. So, and that's a standard, part of the licensing with all of our processors. The 12 channel with the XR4 is the only one that would not have that. I believe you can actually buy the base module or base control module and add that to it. But honestly, if you don't have multiple sub outs, it doesn't make any sense. So. Cool. All right. Where else are we at here?
So
good questions, guys.
So yeah, any other questions? Yeah. Otherwise, we can go to the final step and export it.
Oh, and someone posted a link to the Dirac software on the chat. So excellent.
Perfect.
And I don't know if you guys know the.
So yeah, if there's other questions, we'll go to.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve. I got a little.
Nope, go ahead, Chris.
I got a Dirac story at the end, but I'll save it.
Okay. So yeah, so at this point we're happy with the curve. So we just go to export, and this is basically where we tell it to go to the export. It looks like you guys have already done it. Perfect. So you can add to another slot, or we could write that one over. What do you guys want to do? You just want to go to the second slot?
I just added to another slot. Quentin's been playing quite a bit on that Sunfire one. So rather just add it to another one.
So go to the second slot?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. You want to name it after a famous philosopher, or you want to name it something else?
Just call it audio control.
It's called Stephen.
Steve Haas.
Yeah.
There we go. Famous.
Sir Stephen. Professor Stephen.
Oh, we're not doing that. And then the fun thing about this is the software will say it's done, but if you look at the front panel of the unit, it's probably saying receiving and saving. So he's got to wait until the finish says it's saving, and then it'll go back to just saying Dirac measurements, I believe. And that's when we could, basically exit the software, and then we're done essentially at that point. Then it's a matter of just turning on the curve for the inputs you want to listen to, and we're on your way. Yeah, so the ending of it is definitely somewhat anticlimactic because it just brings you back to here. You think, okay, am I done? And it is, because it gives you a little message up top right, but there's no like success or finished or anything like that. So, but yeah. And yeah, that's it. That is Dirac in a nutshell. As I said earlier, the two touch points really that might throw a wrench the first time doing it, whatever site is, troubleshooting the network issues up front if it can't find the if it can't find the processor, or if it finds it and then it drops off after a few minutes, or in the middle of a pass and it drops off. Typically it just means something's on the network that's fighting with it, and you just have to find it and simplify that, and just setting levels. And after that, it's all pretty straightforward, moving mics, adjusting the curve, and you're done.
Okay. And then Stephen, yeah, just one big point is that you, if you're doing a control system, we found you've got to disconnect the control system from the driver, so it's not communicating with the processor while you're doing Dirac. So you've got to make sure you don't You do your control last. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you just got to tell the system that it's not there, so it stops trying to talk to it, or you just got to take it completely off the system, depending on the scenario. The other big thing, this might be, it seems pretty straightforward, but it's always good to point out, if you're using an RS-232 control system, and if you have it set to RS-232 control, Dirac will never talk to it. You have to have it on IP control for Dirac to talk to it properly. If it's set to RS-232, it's just not going to work.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. No, you definitely want to approach Dirac independent and then go from there. So. Cool. All right. Are there any more questions? Dirac questions? Thank you, Steve. That was particularly comprehensive. So I think that was
thank you, Steve.
What we're looking for there. So.
No problem.
Yeah. And like I said, guys, I don't know if you know the history of Dirac. I mean, Dirac, the guys got out of the university 15, 20 years ago and created this really cool algorithm for room calibration. And they brought it to the world. Unfortunately, things like Odyssey were out there. So they didn't get a lot of traction from the marketplace, from manufacturers and dealers and such like that. But it was a pretty unique thing. So they ended up reaching out to car companies, to Aston Martin and BMW and the European companies. And they actually went and measured these cars, and they licensed Dirac technologies to the car manufacturers. So all you guys who own Aston Martins and Range Rovers and stuff, if you look at, and you had a premium sound system in the day, as it was labeled, was probably Dirac based on the back end in terms of the calibration that went on. Now, fast forward a few years, and obviously Dirac realized the car market's a little limited, and they use that to launch. But then they got involved in Pro. They have a couple of standalone 2-channel pieces, and then we partnered up with them about 4 or 5 years ago. They had a really nice 5.1 solution, but at that time, Atmos and other immersive audio formats were coming out. So Brandon and Steve and the team worked with them to, evolve Dirac Live into something that can handle all these multi-channel formats and bring to play a lot of the balance that goes on there. So, but if you're talking to a client, they may have had a Dirac experience in one of their higher end cars before without really knowing it. So. Awesome.
Chris, thank you so much. It was awesome. Yeah, we learned a lot. Daniel, have all the questions been answered in the chat box?
There we go. Sorry, I had myself muted. Yeah, I think we did get to all of them. If there's anyone that we missed, can I just ask you guys if you let us know? But I think we did get all of them. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for all attending. I know it's a bit late, but and Chris, yeah, thanks for getting up early and helping us out with this. It's great.
No problem. I appreciate it. I mean, it looks like we had about 16 people this morning. I will let me pause the recording.